The story begins with a young woman arriving at a remote ranch under the cover of evening. The setting is deliberately isolated, a vast expanse of open land, rolling hills, and the distant silhouette of the ranch against the fading light. This solitude mirrors her internal state, worn, weary, and carrying invisible burdens. The first impression she gives is one of quiet desperation. Her clothes are slightly torn and dirt-stained, her movements cautious, almost hesitant. Every glance over her shoulder suggests fear, hinting at a past filled with danger or trauma that she is keen to escape. She moves slowly toward the ranch, each step deliberate, signaling her uncertainty and the fragility of her trust in others. Inside the rancher notices her arrival immediately. He is a man shaped by solitude and the harshness of rural life, practical and no-nonsense, with a keen eye for subtle changes in his environment. He sees someone in distress without even needing words. The slight tremor in her hands, the careful way she approaches the porch, and the way her eyes dart nervously all alert him to the fact that she is more than just a lost traveler. His instincts as a protector honed over years managing both the land and its unpredictable dangers kick in immediately. Yet he is cautious, understanding that this woman's fear may extend not only to the world outside but also to him. The tension of this first encounter is heightened by contrast, her vulnerability against his stoicism, her wariness against his calm confidence. The narrative focuses on nonverbal cues, how she clutches her coat tighter around herself, how he pauses at the door, considering whether to approach or wait. Every movement carries weight because they are both strangers, bound by the shared moment of vulnerability and curiosity. The silence between them is almost a character in itself, filled with the unspoken questions, the potential for danger, and the faint promise of safety. Her hesitation is not merely physical but emotional. She has carried experiences that have taught her to guard her heart, to measure trust carefully, and to anticipate betrayal. The rancher's presence, however, is oddly reassuring. He exudes quiet strength, and his eyes, though watchful, lack judgment. This subtle distinction is important. He does not overwhelm her. He does not demand her story or force her into explanation. His restraint speaks louder than words. It signals that she might, for the first time in a long while, encounter someone who can be trusted to respect her boundaries. As the story unfolds in this part, readers are introduced to both the external environment, the ranch, the wide-open landscape, the subtle signs of life like the distant barking of a dog or the creaking of the barn, and the internal environment of the characters. Her internal dialogue, though fragmented and cautious, provides glimpses of the trauma and secrecy that defines her past, creating suspense. The rancher's perspective, grounded and pragmatic, contrasts with her fragile, almost tentative mental state, highlighting the initial gap that will slowly narrow as the story progresses. This part ends with her making the decision to approach the ranch fully, step by step, driven by necessity and a flicker of hope. Though small, this choice signals the start of her journey from fear toward tentative trust. The reader is left with a sense of anticipation. Who is this woman? What horrors or hardships has she endured? And how will this quiet rancher impact the fragile path she is beginning to tread? The mysterious arrival sets the emotional and narrative tone for the story, a blend of suspense, vulnerability, and the promise of healing. After her cautious approach to the ranch, the young woman finally steps onto the porch, her body tense, every movement betraying years of learned caution. The rancher, observing from the doorway, senses her hesitance immediately. He understands the weight of her fear. It is not just the fear of strangers, but a fear of exposure, of being vulnerable and potentially judged. This first contact is a delicate dance, a test of boundaries and intentions, where each word, gesture, and glance carries immense significance. The rancher's role here is not only to offer shelter, but to gauge how much space to give her, balancing kindness with respect for her autonomy. The initial exchange is minimalistic. Words are sparse, often secondary to gestures and expressions. He opens the door, offering warmth from the chill of the evening and a safe place for her to rest. Her response is tentative. She doesn't immediately enter, instead taking a moment to assess him, the space, and the potential for danger. This pause underscores her instinct to evaluate safety before trust. In literature, these pauses often serve to heighten tension, and here they create a fragile bridge between two characters whose lives are about to intertwine. Once inside, the rancher offers simple comforts, a blanket, a warm drink, and a place by the fire. These acts, though mundane, are laden with significance. They symbolize the beginning of a safe space, a small island of normalcy in her otherwise chaotic world. She responds subtly, a slight nod, a quiet acceptance, the softening of her posture. The reader begins to sense the shift, however faint, from extreme vigilance to cautious openness. This moment is crucial because it establishes the foundation of trust that the rest of the story will build upon. Their dialogue, though limited, is revealing. She asks little about him and reveals even less about herself. His questions are gentle, measured, careful not to overwhelm her. There is a tension in what is left unsaid. She flinches at sudden movements, hesitates before speaking, and often diverts the conversation, hinting at trauma without spelling it out. These subtleties convey depth, allowing readers to understand her backstory indirectly through behavior rather than exposition. The rancher, in turn, is patient and observant. His silence is as meaningful as his words. It communicates that he is not there to pry or judge, only to protect. During this first contact, the setting itself plays a critical role. The ranch's interior warm, rustic, and familiar to the rancher contrasts with the cold, unknown world outside that she has been navigating. The firelight flickers across her face, highlighting her tension and vulnerability, while shadows cast around the room symbolize the lingering unknowns in her past. The space is both literal and metaphorical, a safe haven, yet a reminder of the isolation she feels. By the end of this part, the first seeds of connection are sown. She allows herself a fraction of comfort and shows the earliest signs of trust, however tentative. The rancher's steady presence and non-judgmental demeanor are key in this initial bonding, setting a tone of gentle care and reliability. This scene emphasizes how trust is built incrementally through quiet actions, observation, and patience, rather than dramatic declarations. In essence, Part 2 establishes the emotional groundwork for the story. It demonstrates the initial meeting not as a dramatic confrontation, but as a nuanced negotiation of boundaries, fear, and hope. The subtle interactions and the careful pacing invite readers to invest emotionally in both characters, preparing them for the more intense developments of vulnerability, confession, and connection that will follow. By the third part of the story, the narrative begins to delve deeply into the young woman's internal world. Though she has taken tentative steps toward the rancher's shelter and allowed herself minimal comfort, her emotional and physical wounds remain raw and heavy. This part focuses on the weight of her past trauma, the lingering fear that defines her interactions, and the subtle ways it manifests in everyday life on the ranch. It is a critical juncture where the reader gains a deeper understanding of her character and the barriers she faces before she can fully open up. Her pain is largely unspoken, expressed through body language, small gestures, and fleeting expressions rather than dialogue. She flinches at sudden movements, avoids direct eye contact, and hesitates before speaking even the simplest of words. Every action hints at a history of mistrust and fear, allowing the audience to feel the depth of her vulnerability without a single explicit explanation of her past. The rancher notices these subtleties, the slight trembling of her hands, The nervous shift of her gaze, the way she curls into herself when startled. His observations reveal his attentiveness and empathy, positioning him as a patient anchor in her chaotic internal world. In this part, the tension between isolation and the desire for safety is explored in depth. She is constantly negotiating her need for protection against her instinct to remain distant. Her past experiences have taught her that vulnerability is dangerous, yet the rancher's calm presence and non-judgmental approach offer a faint glimmer of hope. She is caught in an internal struggle, the need to remain guarded conflicts with a growing, tentative desire to accept help. This duality drives her character arc, establishing the foundation for later moments of emotional breakthrough. The narrative also uses the physical environment of the ranch to reflect her inner state. Quiet mornings, the distant lowing of cattle, and the rhythmic sounds of chores all serve as a backdrop against which her mental tension plays out. Simple tasks, like carrying water or tending to animals, become exercises in controlling anxiety and testing boundaries. Her struggles with everyday tasks highlight the lasting impact of her trauma, illustrating that recovery is not a linear journey but a series of incremental steps. Meanwhile, the rancher quietly provides structure and guidance without overtly pressing her, reinforcing the theme of trust through presence rather than coercion. This part is crucial for showing how pain can be invisible yet deeply influential. Readers begin to understand that her hesitancy, silence, and occasional outbursts are not signs of weakness but responses shaped by survival. The rancher's reactions, patience, gentle reassurance, and the willingness to offer help without demand underscore the contrast between her past and the safety he provides. These interactions build subtle intimacy, laying the groundwork for the emotional connection that becomes central in later parts. Finally, Part 3 emphasizes the importance of observation and empathy. The rancher does not ask intrusive questions, nor does he attempt to force confessions. Instead, he creates a safe space, giving her the freedom to reveal herself at her own pace. This approach mirrors real-life healing processes, highlighting that trust and recovery are nurtured through consistent, compassionate presence rather than dramatic interventions. By the end of this section, readers sense the slow but undeniable shift. The young woman's walls, while still formidable, are showing the first cracks, signaling the potential for deeper connection and emotional healing. In essence, Part 3 is about the invisible weight of trauma and the subtle beginnings of trust. It explores how pain shapes behavior, how isolation can both protect and imprison, and how quiet empathy can open doors that force and persuasion never could. It deepens character development, prepares the emotional landscape for forthcoming breakthroughs, and reinforces the story's central themes of vulnerability, patience, and healing. Part 4 represents a turning point in the narrative, a moment when the young woman's carefully constructed defenses begin to crack. Up until now, her interactions with the rancher have been cautious and measured, marked by subtle gestures and minimal dialogue. She has allowed herself only a hint of comfort, keeping her emotions tightly controlled. In this part, however, external circumstances force her into a situation where her fear, pain, and vulnerability are exposed in a way that cannot be contained, creating an intimate, emotionally charged moment that deepens both character development and the bond between the two protagonists. The inciting incident often takes the form of a sudden accident or a stressful situation on the rancho panicked horse, a fall while performing chores, or another unexpected danger. This event, while minor in terms of physical harm, triggers a flood of emotional responses tied to her past trauma. Pain and fear override her usual restraint, and she cries out, whispering, "It hurts so much." This cry is significant not only for the words themselves but for the raw honesty and unfiltered emotion they convey. Unlike previous moments where she carefully masks her suffering, This instance lays her internal state bare, revealing the depth of her wounds and her desperate need for care and reassurance. The rancher's response in this moment is immediate and instinctive. He freezes initially, struck by the intensity and vulnerability in her voice, but quickly moves to comfort her. His actions holding her close, speaking softly, offering steady physical and emotional support serve as a tangible embodiment of safety and trust. This interaction highlights a central theme of the story. Healing begins not when pain is erased, but when it is acknowledged and met with compassion. The contrast between her fragile vulnerability and his unwavering presence creates a powerful emotional resonance, emphasizing the human need for connection in moments of crisis. This part also deepens the exploration of their relationship dynamic. Previously, the rancher's role was largely observational and protective from a distance, allowing her to navigate her trauma at her own pace. In this moment, however, his protective instincts intersect with her acute need, creating a convergence of their emotional trajectories. The rancher's patience and gentleness allow her to experience comfort without judgment, reinforcing the slow but growing trust that has been building since her arrival. Importantly, this moment is not romanticized. It is intimate, yes, but grounded in realism. It emphasizes the psychological and emotional weight of trauma, showing how a single, empathetic act can begin to break down the barriers a survivor has erected over years. Additionally, Part 4 uses physicality and sensory detail to convey emotion. The warmth of the rancher's arms, the subtle sound of his voice, the security of his presence, these sensory experiences contrast sharply with the chaos of her memories and the lingering fear she carries. The environment of the ranch, isolated, quiet, and controlled, mirrors the safety he provides, creating a backdrop that amplifies the significance of her vulnerability. Readers are drawn into the immediacy of the moment, feeling her pain and relief as if they are present themselves. By the end of this part, the young woman has experienced a profound shift. She has allowed herself to be seen in her most fragile state and has, for the first time, felt comfort that is untainted by judgment or fear. This moment acts as a catalyst for her emotional growth, marking the beginning of a deeper, more trusting relationship with the rancher. It sets the stage for subsequent parts where shared experiences, gentle guidance, and continued presence will slowly help her reclaim agency and self-assurance. In essence, Part 4 focuses on the transformative power of vulnerability and compassionate support. It illustrates how trust is not built through words alone, but through empathetic action and emotional presence. This chapter is pivotal because it bridges the gap between fear and tentative trust, between isolation and the possibility of connection, laying the emotional groundwork for the story's subsequent arcs of healing, intimacy, and love. Part 5 represents a profound emotional turning point in the story. After the previous moment of raw vulnerability, when the young woman cried out in pain and fear, this section focuses on the immediate aftermath and the transformative impact of the rancher's response. It is here that the central theme of trust and emotional security is fully emphasized, with the rancher's actions and words providing a stabilizing force that begins to shift the dynamics of their relationship from cautious coexistence to tentative connection and growing intimacy. The narrative opens with the woman still trembling from her moment of vulnerability. Her body is tense, her breathing uneven, and her mind flooded with the lingering echoes of fear and trauma. She is aware, in a faint, almost subconscious way, that she is finally being seen, not as a problem to be fixed, not as a curiosity, but as a person deserving of care and protection. The rancher's immediate instinct is to respond with a calm, steady presence. He draws her close, enveloping her in an embrace that is both protective and non-intrusive. This physical closeness communicates a silent promise. "You are safe with me." His words, gentle and deliberate, reinforce this assurance. Whispering, "I've got you," he transforms a simple statement into a binding vow of support, demonstrating through both action and language that he will remain steadfast, regardless of her fears or past experiences. This moment is crucial because it solidifies the foundation of trust between the characters. Trust, especially for someone carrying trauma, is earned incrementally through consistent, reliable actions. The rancher's promise is not dramatic or performative. It is quiet, sincere, and grounded in reality. He does not attempt to erase her pain or rush her healing. Instead, he acknowledges it, meets it with compassion, and offers his unwavering support. This distinction is vital for portraying a realistic emotional arc, highlighting that healing and connection are fostered through patience, empathy, and reliability rather than grand gestures or instantaneous solutions. Emotionally, the young woman experiences a subtle but profound shift. The act of allowing herself to be held without fear or resistance signals the beginning of her internal transformation. For the first time, she confronts the possibility that not everyone will harm her or exploit her vulnerability. This moment offers her a glimpse of safety, not just physical, but emotional, a space where she can begin to process her trauma without the constant overlay of anxiety and distrust. It is the first step toward rebuilding her sense of self and reclaiming agency over her emotions. The scene also emphasizes the interplay between vulnerability and strength. While she is fragile and exposed in this moment, the courage required to allow someone into that vulnerability is itself a form of strength. The rancher's role complements this by demonstrating that strength can also be expressed through patience, attentiveness, and unwavering support. Their emotional exchange is a delicate balance of give and take. She offers trust, he offers protection and understanding. This reciprocity deepens the narrative's exploration of healthy emotional connection, showing that intimacy grows not from possession or control, but from mutual acknowledgement and care. Additionally, the sensory and environmental details reinforce the emotional resonance of the scene. The warmth of the fire, the quiet sounds of the ranch at night, the steady cadence of his voice all combine to create a cocoon of safety and intimacy. These elements contrast sharply with the chaos and fear of her past experiences, highlighting the transformative power of the present moment. By the end of Part 5, the narrative has moved decisively from tension and fear to reassurance and tentative trust. The rancher's promise is more than words. It is an emotional anchor for the young woman, a tangible signal that she is not alone and that healing, though gradual, is possible. This pivotal scene lays the emotional groundwork for the story's subsequent developments, where shared experiences, continued care, and gradual revelation of past trauma will further deepen their bond and guide her toward genuine recovery and emotional intimacy. Part 6 marks a shift in the story from immediate emotional survival toward the slow, steady rhythm of daily life and shared experiences. After the young woman's earlier moments of vulnerability and the rancher's reassuring presence, she begins to tentatively engage with the ranch's routines. This part focuses on how ordinary tasks, feeding animals, tending to the land, mending fences, become instruments of healing and connection. Through these shared responsibilities, both characters navigate trust, mutual respect, and a gradual rebuilding of confidence, illustrating that recovery often arises not from dramatic interventions, but from consistent, steady engagement with life and with others. At the start of this part, the young woman is still cautious. She participates in chores with hesitancy, careful not to overstep or draw attention to herself. Her movements are deliberate, measured, reflecting a lingering fear of failure or criticism. Yet the rancher does not treat her with condescension. Instead, he offers quiet guidance and encouragement. For example, when handling livestock, he demonstrates patience, allowing her to learn at her own pace while remaining close enough to intervene if necessary. These small, everyday interactions reinforce a sense of safety and predictability, which is essential for someone recovering from trauma. Over time, these repeated acts of reassurance help her internalize the idea that she can function competently and safely in her new environment. Shared responsibilities also serve as a mechanism for emotional connection. Through cooperative work, the two characters communicate without relying solely on words. Their interactions are punctuated by subtle gestures, a hand extended to steady her, a gentle nod of approval, or shared laughter at a small mishap. These moments, though seemingly mundane, carry profound emotional weight. They signal a growing familiarity and comfort between the characters, reinforcing the idea that trust is built incrementally through consistent, supportive engagement. This interplay between practical tasks and emotional intimacy becomes a central theme in this part, illustrating how everyday life can act as a vehicle for healing and bonding. Moreover, Part 6 highlights the young woman's emerging agency. By taking responsibility for certain chores and gradually mastering new skills, she begins to reclaim a sense of competence and self-worth that may have been eroded by past trauma. The rancher's supportive presence ensures that this growth occurs in a non-threatening environment, where mistakes are treated as part of the learning process rather than as failures. This approach underscores the story's emphasis on gradual, realistic emotional development rather than sudden, unrealistic transformations. Readers witness her transformation not as a dramatic leap, but as a series of small, meaningful steps, each building on the last. The narrative also uses the ranch setting as a symbolic framework. The land and animals represent stability, continuity, and the rhythms of life that contrast with the chaos of her past experiences. Engaging with these elements allows her to ground herself, creating tangible connections to the present moment and reinforcing her emerging sense of belonging. The rancher, too, is shaped by this environment. His steadiness and resilience mirror the land itself, providing a reliable anchor for her emotional growth. By the end of Part 6, the young woman's initial hesitancy has begun to give way to cautious confidence. The shared responsibilities have become a conduit for trust, companionship, and subtle intimacy. While her past trauma remains unspoken, its impact is softened by the daily rituals of life and the steady, compassionate presence of the rancher. This part underscores the narrative's central theme. Healing and connection are cultivated not only through dramatic moments of vulnerability, but also through shared, consistent, and meaningful engagement with life and others. In essence, Part 6 emphasizes the transformative power of routine, cooperation, and mutual support. Through the rhythm of shared responsibilities, the story illustrates how trust is nurtured, confidence is restored, and emotional bonds deepen, setting the stage for further revelations, confrontations, and growth in the subsequent chapters. Part 7 introduces a critical element of tension and suspense by confronting the young woman with her past. Until this point, the story has focused on tentative trust, emotional connection, and gradual healing through shared responsibilities and moments of vulnerability. However, trauma, by its very nature, is persistent. Part 7 reminds readers and the characters themselves that the past cannot be entirely escaped, no matter how safe the present seems. This section explores the emotional complexity of confronting old fears, the fragility of trust, and the ways unresolved trauma can resurface, threatening to disrupt the fragile equilibrium that has been established. The inciting incident of this part often comes in the form of a reminder of her previous life. A stranger arrives, a letter or message surfaces, or a rumor from her past reaches the remote ranch. This intrusion acts as a jolt, shattering the sense of security she has begun to build. The story emphasizes the psychological impact of such encounters. She reacts with immediate fear, withdrawal, and internal conflict torn between the safety she has found with the rancher and the instinct to flee from the shadows of her past. These reactions are grounded in realism. Trauma survivors frequently experience heightened anxiety and hypervigilance when confronted with triggers, even in environments that feel safe. The rancher's role in this part becomes pivotal. His perception of her distress and his empathetic response highlight the depth of his commitment. Unlike others who might judge or dismiss her reactions, he approaches the situation with understanding and care. He does not attempt to force her to confront her past on his schedule. Instead, he provides a stable, calm presence that reinforces her sense of safety. This contrasts sharply with the threat posed by her past, emphasizing the protective and healing nature of their bond. Through his patience, he models an important lesson. Trauma is not invalidated by the safety of the present, but it can be managed with support, understanding, and consistent care. Emotionally, Part 7 delves into the tension between avoidance and confrontation. The young woman's initial instinct is to retreat physically, emotionally, and psychologically. Yet the narrative also shows the beginnings of resilience. She realizes that running from her past may no longer be the only option. The rancher's quiet encouragement and unwavering support empower her to face this intrusion, however tentatively. This dynamic deepens both characters' emotional arcs. She begins to reclaim agency over her reactions, and he demonstrates the depth of his empathy and commitment. Their relationship grows more complex, moving beyond trust into partnership and shared endurance in the face of challenges. The part also emphasizes the interplay of internal and external conflict. While her internal struggle dominates fear, shame, and lingering anxiety, external circumstances force decisions and actions that test her coping mechanisms. These moments of confrontation are not resolved easily. The story does not offer instant relief or closure. Instead, they are portrayed as realistic, challenging steps in her ongoing journey toward healing. The reader experiences her fear, uncertainty, and tentative courage, creating tension while also deepening emotional investment in her development. By the end of Part 7, the young woman begins to acknowledge that her past is a part of her story, but it does not have to define her future. The rancher's steadfast presence reinforces the idea that trauma can coexist with healing, provided there is trust, patience, and empathy. This section lays the groundwork for deeper emotional breakthroughs in subsequent parts, highlighting that true connection and recovery often require confronting shadows rather than avoiding them. In essence, Part 7 explores the inevitability of past trauma resurfacing and its emotional ramifications. It examines the delicate balance between fear and courage, avoidance and confrontation, isolation and support. Through realistic depiction of trauma triggers empathetic guidance and the slow reclamation of agency, this part deepens the story's emotional complexity, illustrating that healing is not linear but forged through perseverance, trust, and enduring human connection. Part 8 represents a pivotal moment in the narrative where the young woman experiences a significant emotional breakthrough. After the tension and fear triggered by the resurfacing of her past in Part 7, this section focuses on her ability to confront both her trauma and her growing feelings for the rancher. It is a turning point where vulnerability evolves into courage, and tentative trust transforms into deeper intimacy, marking a critical step in her journey of healing. The emotional breakthrough often arises from a high-stakes event or confrontation that forces her to face what she has been avoiding. This could be a natural threat on the ranch, an unexpected injury, or an emotionally charged situation that mirrors elements of her past trauma. Unlike earlier moments, where vulnerability was mostly expressed in private or through quiet pain, this scenario compels her to act, to acknowledge her emotions openly, and to rely on the rancher's support in a more conscious and deliberate way. It is a test of her resilience, illustrating that healing is not just about safety or avoidance, but about engagement, risk, and the courage to embrace emotional truth. In this part, the rancher plays a crucial role as both a stabilizing force and an empathetic guide. He is present not to rescue her in the traditional sense, but to provide consistent reassurance and understanding. His support allows her to navigate the intense emotions of fear, grief, or shame without becoming overwhelmed. Through his actions, steadying hands, calm voice, and patient presence, he reinforces the idea that she is not alone. Importantly, this moment also deepens their emotional connection. She begins to recognize that reliance on another human being can be a source of strength rather than vulnerability, challenging long-held beliefs shaped by past trauma. The narrative explores the interplay between internal struggle and external action. As she faces the triggering situation, her mind and body respond in ways that are both instinctual and learned. Flinches, hesitations, and flashes of panic demonstrate that trauma cannot be erased overnight. Yet her ability to act despite fear signals growth. The rancher's calm presence anchors her, providing a contrast between the chaos of her internal reactions and the safety of her immediate environment. This juxtaposition emphasizes the story's ongoing theme. Trust and healing are cultivated not by erasing fear, but by creating space in which fear can exist alongside support, empathy, and understanding. This breakthrough also includes verbal and emotional communication that has been building throughout the story. For the first time, she may share details of her past or articulate her feelings more openly, albeit in fragments. The rancher listens without judgment, validating her experiences and reinforcing her sense of worth and dignity. These exchanges are subtle yet powerful, highlighting that emotional breakthroughs often arise not from dramatic confrontations or confessions, but from moments of empathetic listening, acceptance, and the courage to be vulnerable in the presence of someone trustworthy. By the end of Part 8, the young woman experiences a significant shift in self-perception. She begins to internalize the possibility of healing, recognizes her capacity for resilience, and feels a growing emotional bond with the rancher. This breakthrough is not absolute. Remnants of fear and mistrust remain, reflecting the story's commitment to realistic, nuanced emotional development. However, it represents a decisive step forward, signaling that she is moving from a state of reactive fear to one of proactive engagement with life, relationships, and her own emotions. In essence, Part 8 emphasizes the transformative power of vulnerability and supportive human connection. It illustrates how facing fear, supported by patience and empathy, can catalyze emotional growth, deepen trust, and foster intimacy. This section lays the emotional groundwork for the story's resolution, demonstrating that healing is an ongoing process, but breakthroughs are possible when courage and compassion converge. Part 9 serves as the emotional and narrative climax of the story, where the young woman and the rancher confront the culmination of their shared experiences, challenges, and emotional growth. Up until this point, the story has traced her journey from vulnerability and fear through incremental trust, moments of comfort, and emotional breakthroughs. This part focuses on how they transition from tentative trust to a fully engaged mutual partnership, both in life and in emotional connection. It is a pivotal moment where the foundation laid in the previous part solidifies into a deeper, more resilient bond. The turning point is often catalyzed by a situation that requires both characters to rely on one another fully, whether through an external challenge on the ranch, such as a natural disaster, injury, or urgent task, or through an emotionally charged confrontation with lingering fears or unresolved trauma. This scenario tests not only her ability to respond with courage, but also the depth of their partnership. The stakes are high, highlighting the reality that trust and connection must be continually reinforced through action, not merely words or intention. For the young woman, this is the moment when she must confront the lingering effects of her past while actively participating in building a new, secure present. Emotionally, this part emphasizes reciprocity. Whereas earlier moments often positioned her as the recipient of care and support, now there is a balance. She contributes her strength, resilience, and insight, demonstrating that trust and partnership are mutual. This reciprocity is crucial for her sense of agency. It shows that she is not merely a passive figure in her healing process, but an active participant in shaping her future. Similarly, the rancher's responses, his patience, guidance, and empathy highlight his commitment not just to protect, but to engage with her as an equal partner. Their relationship evolves from caretaker and survivor to a dynamic of mutual reliance, understanding, and respect. The narrative also explores the symbolic and emotional significance of shared challenges. Just as working together on the ranch earlier helped cultivate trust through routine, confronting a high-stakes scenario together reinforces the bond under conditions of pressure and uncertainty. The reader witnesses the interplay of fear, courage, and mutual support, which transforms their connection into a tangible, enduring partnership. This moment illustrates that true intimacy is forged not only in moments of comfort, but also through facing adversity together. Furthermore, Part 9 emphasizes the internal transformations that accompany external challenges. The young woman demonstrates a growing ability to process her emotions, confront fear without being paralyzed by it, and communicate her needs and boundaries. These changes are subtle but significant. Her confidence, assertiveness, and willingness to engage emotionally indicate the maturation of her character arc. The rancher, in turn, shows his vulnerability by acknowledging his own limitations and feelings, further deepening their emotional connection. Together, they model a relationship based on equality, trust, and empathy. By the end of Part 9, the turning point has solidified the emotional trajectory for the story's resolution. The young woman has moved from a place of reactive fear and guardedness to one of conscious engagement with both her emotions and her environment. The rancher has demonstrated that support, patience, and unwavering presence can foster resilience and trust. The narrative sets the stage for closure in the final part, highlighting the enduring impact of trust, courage, and shared experience. In essence, Part 9 is about consolidation and empowerment. It shows that true emotional growth involves both facing past trauma and embracing mutual vulnerability. By integrating lessons learned from earlier moments, trust, patience, shared responsibility, and emotional honesty, the story reaches its penultimate point, a turning point where characters move from cautious survival to the conscious creation of a shared, hopeful future. This part underscores the themes of resilience, partnership, and the transformative power of enduring human connection. Part 10 serves as the emotional resolution of the story, where the journey of trust, vulnerability, and resilience comes full circle. By this point, the young woman has confronted her fears, begun to process her past trauma, and developed a deep bond with the rancher through shared experiences, emotional breakthroughs, and mutual support. This final part emphasizes the ongoing process of healing, the promise of safety and belonging, and the hopeful potential of love and connection. It is both a culmination of the emotional arcs and a forward-looking vision of a life that is gradually being reclaimed from the shadow of fear and pain. The narrative in this part often begins with a quiet, reflective moment on the ranch. The young woman is more comfortable in her surroundings and in her interactions with the rancher. Daily routines, which once represented challenges or sources of anxiety, now serve as opportunities for engagement, competence, and shared accomplishment. Feeding animals, mending fences, and tending to the land are no longer just chores. They have become exercises in empowerment, signaling her progress from hesitation to participation, from dependency to agency. Each action demonstrates not only her growing confidence, but also her capacity to trust both herself and the supportive presence of the rancher. Emotionally, This part emphasizes the concept of safety as a prerequisite for healing. The rancher's unwavering presence, his consistent patience, protection, and empathy has created an environment where vulnerability is not punished but met with care. The phrase from the story's title, "I've got you," becomes a living promise, reinforced not only through words but through countless small, tangible actions over time. This reinforcement solidifies the emotional foundation for her recovery, showing that trauma can be softened, if not erased, through consistent and compassionate support. Part 10 also highlights the integration of past and present. While remnants of her trauma remain memories, scars, and occasional fear, she has begun to accept them as part of her story rather than defining limitations. The narrative demonstrates that healing does not require the complete erasure of pain, but rather the creation of space for safety, trust, and self-compassion. She can now acknowledge her past without being overwhelmed, and this acknowledgement allows her to engage more fully in life and relationships. The rancher's acceptance of her history further reinforces that she is valued and loved for the entirety of who she is, not just her present or her struggles. The emotional intimacy between the two characters reaches its gentle apex in this part. Small gestures, sharing a quiet evening by the fire, holding hands while watching the sunset, or the silent comfort of being physically close serve as symbols of the trust, understanding, and love that has grown organically over time. Unlike dramatic declarations, these moments emphasize subtlety, realism, and depth, reinforcing that genuine healing and emotional connection often emerge from consistent care, shared experience, and mutual respect rather than sudden, sweeping gestures. By the conclusion of Part 10, the story conveys a powerful message about resilience and hope. The young woman is no longer defined solely by her past trauma. She has reclaimed agency over her life and embraced the possibility of happiness and connection. The rancher remains a stabilizing, empathetic presence, symbolizing the enduring power of trust, patience, and compassionate support. Their relationship embodies a balance of vulnerability and strength, showing that healing is a collaborative, ongoing process, but one that can lead to genuine hope and fulfillment. In essence, Part 10 emphasizes that true healing is both gradual and multidimensional. It combines emotional safety, trust, shared experience, and personal agency to create the conditions for hope to flourish. The story closes on a tender, reassuring note, highlighting that while scars remain, they coexist with safety, love, and the promise of a brighter, more secure future. It leaves the reader with a sense of resolution, emotional closure, and enduring optimism.